Okay, I'm recording. Let's see how far this goes, guys. Since you're already here. So what we did was, last week we said we're still at the doing the behavior design process part, and we're still trying to, I want to talk at least a little bit about diversity today and personality specifically. Um, we are at week 12 actually, but we, that's one class has been done extra, but the next class should be the last one. Okay, today we're just gonna go past this into the behavior design process that we started, and I think everyone was here except for Iris. But Iris has been working with the behavior design canvas before. Not to say that like it's okay that she missed it. I do think that if you had watched the previous one, then you'd be kind of up to date, because we worked specifically with this Audible case, which is this app for which lets users purchase and stream audiobooks, right? So we got into that and we started looking at, okay, how do you use the behavior design canvas to kind of start thinking of new behaviors, or uh, kind of stopping old behaviors. And this is all just recap from the last class. That's why I'm going a bit fast. Um, and then saying, if you also want to continue a behavior, we looked at certain strategies, so to speak, as to how do we begin working with the canvas. Okay. And we kind of looked at the importance of user insight, and we said, since we don't we've not developed either a user model such as an archetype or a persona fully. And if we did, we need to be thorough about the research, and we need to share those insights clearly. We said, why don't we just do the canvas like you are the typical user? And I think it's kind of interesting because uh, if we had worked on a persona or a user model together, then we'd all be brainstorming towards behavior change for one person, um, or one user or one type of user. But now we're getting just a lot of variety. It's a little bit more complex. It's a little bit more elaborate when we're moving from one view to the other and saying, hey, what's your case and what's your case? Even though that's a little bit more tedious as a process, it still, I think, gives us lots of variety and different views into just how many, how much diversity you can have in terms of behavior change for just one product like Audible. So again, if you saw the last class, you'd see that there was a lot of variation in what you guys wanted to do, and we went a little bit further with a couple of the cases. So Katie and Tom were around towards the end, where I think they went furthest. Sia had to drop off at some point, and Philip also had to drop off at some point. So we touched upon these motivational models that you see here. Try to quickly recall what the theory that we'd studied in that part, and said, how can we add all of those as inputs into the canvas? So this is where I think we stopped. I watched the last class again today, and I realized, okay, mostly for everyone, we were basically at doing the align part, and there was this question of amplifying behavior, and or amplifying motivation and then amplifying behavior. So Katie, for example, had a case where she's looking at amplifying motivation through a persuasive appeal, and Ines, for example, she done her canvas and submitted it on the Slack, and she was looking to amplify the enabler itself, but she didn't get detailed enough. And that's kind of, and Philip was also, he was here. He was at this point of amplifying enabler. So yeah, any questions up to this point? And I don't know, what do we do? Because Iris, would you just like to follow and shadow the rest? And maybe you can work with one of these guys or suggest ideas for one of these guys' canvases and provide inputs there. And Jamie, we wasn't sure where you were because I think you were trying to connect with your phone and stuff. So it wasn't sure if you'd gotten to doing any of the Canvas stuff for your case, or where was it?
Yeah, I did. I was in the car for part of it and some connection issues,
Sure.
but I did come up with a case, or whatever we were talking about there. I did jot down.
Okay. So are you at you are you in the align box as well and trying to figure that out? Or did you have the
I gotta check that. Let me pull up notes. Yeah, I believe so. The line box.
Okay. I guess the key thing I wanted to add here in the align box was when we're looking at amplifying the enabler for a human to do the target behavior. For example, in Inez's case, she had written in her online, in the canvas that she submitted on Slack, she had written that provide a button to do the behavior. And while that's not a unrealistic final idea, at the align box, you're still trying to understand what's the gap, what enabler the user is kind of missing in order to do the behavior. And so one could go deeper and we could think about things like opportunity. For example, you might have, in some cases, you might have the resources and you might have the ability to do the behavior, but you just don't have the opportunity. For example, a busy parent, right? If someone's has small children, they don't have much opportunity to do anything because of just how tight their hands are. Or think of anything that takes away opportunities to do behaviors, which could be responsibilities of other kinds. But agency is closely connected to that because, for example, if you don't have the if you're somehow socially not given the chance, or there is an unequal power relationship in the workplace, or for example, in employee behavior change, there is often this problem of lack of agency because companies can be very hierarchical and they can be very rigid in terms of who can do what. And often we might think, oh, this is the behavior change we want, but then an employee might not be able to actually, they can do the behavior physically, they have the mental abilities, but they just don't have somehow the political agency to do it. So this box is, think about these very high level issues as well. And then novelty we spoke about earlier. Sometimes things are just not new enough or interesting enough to do. But the resources is the key one, in the sense that resources is the part that Fogg works on or provides in his theory, for example. And he just talks about resources as anything that makes a behavior simpler, right? So resources make it easy, make a behavior easier to do. And resources can be things like, time or money, physical effort, mental effort, or brain cycles, as Fogg calls it. Social deviance. Social deviance is, it's hard to do a behavior that is socially deviant or just challenges social norms. So if you want your user to wear one shoe, walk around with one shoe, that's just looked down upon. It looks funny and weird by other people. And so people will not do behaviors that are socially deviant or socially unacceptable. So looking at culture, trying to understand if the behavior is socially acceptable is a big one, and it could totally reduce ability, right? And then non-routine is behaviors that are just that require breaking out of a routine or a pattern. So interestingly, novelty and non-routine are almost like opposites. Sometimes we don't do things because they're not new enough or interesting enough. And sometimes we don't do things because it just requires us to break out of a pattern. But anyways, when you think of amplify, this box, it's a lot of things that you can consider. And that's kind of where this box is going at. So to continue on with the exercise of Audible itself, if maybe Jamie, because you hadn't discussed your case the last time, it would be cool if you could just update us on what was your present and desired behavior and where you were with the align details. And then we go to the others as well.
Yeah, so maybe you could go to the others. I was just looking, I couldn't find the piece of paper that I wrote everything
Okay,
down on.
that's
So
fine.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
do what I
okay.
can to recreate it.
Okay. Yeah, if you can recall while someone else is doing their piece, that's also cool, because yeah, then you'd be able to finish one canvas.
Yeah, try that.
Maybe we ended with Tom's. Maybe Katie. Did you figure out what, like, did you figure out more specifically what appeal? I mean, you said it would be ethos, and then did you think of the is there anything more you can think about in terms of amplifying the enabler as well?
Like how to get the users to trust the suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go further than that.
Yeah. So we could take a few minutes and think about it, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take 5 to 8 minutes and think about that. Yeah, I was just saying that if you like Iris, you could start on your canvas for Audible and think of like a current behavior that you'd like to change into a desired behavior.
Yeah, I'm currently looking through the deck that you
Cool.
sent me last week. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it last week.
That's okay. Okay. Anybody want to share? But if you want more time, just let me know.
I
Oh.
can go.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you ready, Jamie? Do you want to catch
Yeah,
up,
you
Jamie?
go ahead.
Yeah, go for it, Jamie.
Okay. So this is to clarify for a behavior that a current behavior and a behavior that audible that we would want to build as audible.
Mhm.
Okay. So my current behavior is listening to Clubhouse, listening to podcasts, or
Going straight to the
nothing.
competition. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, no. It shouldn't be either Clubhouse or nothing. It's got to be one or the other. I mean, you're either listening to something or you're not listening to something. One of those is the current behavior.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess they're about current behaviors depending on the context. But all right, let's leave it at Clubhouse then.
Clubhouse or and other podcasts or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
And I mean, in that case, the target behavior.
Yes.
What I had written down was looking for opportunities to listen to audiobooks instead.
Looking for
but I don't know. Do you think it
opportunities.
should be more specific?
Yeah, I think like looking for opportunities to listen to audiobooks is a behavior as well. It's just like the way it's defined is. Anybody have any ideas on that? Are you saying searching for?
Like looking for opportunities to multitask, pick an audiobook to listen to. So it's like increasing awareness. So yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, increasing awareness of the possibility to multitask while listening to audiobooks.
Because that would make me listen to audiobooks.
Could it be just that multitasking while listening to audiobooks is your target behavior?
Sure.
Okay.
And so you would, I guess.
Or I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get to what you're. So you're saying that it's not multitasking while listening to audiobooks. You're saying that you want to create a behavior where the user searches for when to listen to audiobooks.
Yes.
Okay, you want to
build the new behavior.
Surface, right? Okay, surface opportunities. Or find. Surfacing would be done by the app, right? So that's not the target behavior, but find moments in time when to multitask and listen to audiobooks. Find new opportunities to listen to audiobooks. Okay. Okay, I think the word
Why not?
new was what I was missing. So
Okay,
fine, yes.
new
Okay.
opportunities.
Mhm. Okay, great. That's very interesting. Well, that's exactly the kind of behavior change that Audible should be trying to create, I guess.
Mhm.
Great. And then did you have a chance to look at the motivational box?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, so motivation is already there to do it. So I don't know what you, uh, yeah, what you would say for this, because it seemed like there's opportunity, um, and
Mhm.
uh, I guess I wasn't sure about this part. I said selecting activities, like potential multitasking activities, kind of make that conscious.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah.
But this is the target user is you, so we at least that's like there's no ambiguity in terms of who is using it. So if you look
Mm-hmm.
at your own motivation, I think, or to me, it seems like you do have the motivation for that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Okay, so then you are in the yes box. So you are motivated to do the target behavior, but so that means I don't need to amplify. Do we need to amplify Jamie's motivation to do this target behavior, or do we merely need to enable it?
Enable it.
Yeah, I guess we could try both, but you could just go with enable to start with, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
So
then what are the barriers that you're facing? What, when it comes to enablement, what are you lacking? The opportunity, I
lacking.
think, is the big one here for me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Well, opportunity.
Mhm.
So yeah, what would you say to elaborate further on opportunity?
Yeah, we'll need to think about that in the shape part, because that's where
Oh,
the
okay.
shaping gets, we can get into the details of that. But I'm just wondering, is
Okay.
there anything else in the yes box that applies to you? Like, do you have all the resources you need or potentially need for this behavior?
Yeah. The thing I wrote down was resources. I don't know if you would consider this under resources, but it'd be like like, yeah. I mean, okay, so in
Yeah.
this perspective, just be I mean the time to do it, and then the mental effort to decide
Mhm.
the book that I want to listen to,
Mhm.
and aligning it with the task at hand would be
Right.
for me, yeah, to do the opportunity.
Interesting. Hmm. Interesting. So are you saying that you would need some, you want the task and you want the book you're listening to have some relationship?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, cool. Money, physical effort. Hmm. Is that because you think that you would reduce the mental effort of the task while because of listening to the audiobook? Would you, I don't know, do something? Would it make would you make the task more enjoyable and less burdensome if you were listening to an audiobook? Is that where you're going with it?
It's it's that certain material can pair better with certain activities.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
if the activity is more kind of cognitively demanding,
Mm-hmm.
it's needs something that's lighter and less dense
Yes.
versus something that's very stationary or
Yes.
like less intensive, can
Awesome.
mundane, can have something complex
Right.
and dense listening to.
So true. That's a really cool. If you can come up with a feature that helps users through that complexity, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Do you have coffee? But yeah, that sounds
No,
really
sir.
good. If you have any examples, let's move on to someone else. And if you have any
Okay.
examples of these pairings, then I'm sure you already have some notions of what they could be. But make sure to just capture them while you have them.
All right.
Great.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay. Iris, how's it going? Did you think of anything?
Yeah, I do identify some desired behavior.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if this is correct, but the jobs to be done that I identify would be when customer or when audience are looking for something to listen to while they are like doing housework or they are like go out for jogging. And there could be many choices like Spotify or Clubhouse or other choices, right? But at this moment, the desired behavior would be they will open the audio app and choose some audiobook to read.
Very
Yeah, so
comprehensive.
I think it's pretty similar with Jamie.
Yes, except you're approaching it from the activity.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
So the activities you mentioned were doing housework or while jogging?
Yes, like this kind of work that doesn't need to be fully focused on something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you have your present behaviors, which are jogging or doing housework. We can stick to just those two, and it's kind of very specific. That's great. And then open up the Audible app.
Right.
And launch a book.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Lots of like interesting, all of these. I mean, this is where it gets difficult and complex as to how we can get people to do these things, but that's exactly the point of this exercise. Great. And then would you say that you're sufficiently motivated?
Sufficiently sorry?
Would you say that you have motivation or enough motivation to do this behavior?
I think people are motivated, but the problem would be there are too many choices on their phone. They can either choose Spotify or choose other apps instead of audio.
Exactly. So what is the enabler where you see which can be enhanced? Is it the opportunity that's lacking?
How do you define opportunity here?
An opportunity is a sort of a barrier. It's not the opportunity. The opportunity is something that gives you a chance to do something new. Right? Or
I could again 1 month trial membership.
Okay.
Sort of an opportunity or
Oh, I wouldn't see, that's the thing. At this stage, I wouldn't try to come up with solutions. So we are simply trying to understand the category of enabler that we
I
we
see. I
should
see. Only
target here.
category.
Yes, because the shaping in the third part of the canvas, that's where we get into all the nitty-gritties of, does it need
I
to be a
see.
call to action? Does it need to be a this or
Mhm.
that or whatever? Is it a feature? Is it a button?
Mm,
See, that's why we need to stay abstract at this stage so we can get as clear as
Mm.
possible about what is the barrier, why people are
Okay.
not doing this
I see.
behavior already. Because if they are sufficiently motivated, why are they not doing it? You know?
Yeah. Right.
And in many cases, it might be things like money, physical
Mhm.
effort. It may be very concrete things, but in this case, it's not that. They have all the apps, they have the time, they have the mental bandwidth. They just
Mhm.
somehow, they have the agency for sure, but they somehow just don't see the value of it.
Mm, I see. Then I think this one will be opportunity
Mhm.
because there are too many apps to use at
Yes,
this kind of situation,
yeah,
but the audio app lacks sort of an opportunity to be
exactly.
aware by the audiences.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's quite vague, but that's the best we have at this moment. It doesn't really fit any other category, but it fits the opportunity category, this problem. And so I would say, yes, they're lacking in opportunity to try this app.
Mhm.
And we should probably put that down and move on.
A question.
Yes.
What's the intention in this box for filling out the canvas what are you imagining is written down?
Well, you write down, see, the thing is, the canvas itself, you can put down multiple post-it notes and say opportunity is lacking. You can say lots of other apps competing with this app. User does not think about or is not conscious about the fact of using Audible in that moment. You can describe it, you can put notes down, you can document whatever is relevant, really. But it's just to
Okay.
get very close to the problem of lack of ability or lack of enablers.
Okay, so it's writing down the obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. The category and the obstacle also,
Okay.
but not yet jumping into how would we solve them. It's not yet there. Right?
Got it.
Cool. So then what happens is once we see that, oh, this is the barrier, we can brainstorm around multiple ideas to overcome that barrier.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's something. I guess looking at this out of context of everything else, it's sort
Mhm.
of unclear what to do with each of these things.
Right.
Or, like same thing. I guess in the motivated user intent box
Mm-hmm.
is the intention there to like I guess do the same thing, write category, and then
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Category and then the
Actually, I have
specifics.
another.
Yes.
Sorry. No, I just have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Could there be multiple elements in this box?
Could there be multiple
Yeah.
elements?
Or
Yes.
there should be.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. There can be multiple elements. Just keep in mind that if you're targeting multiple behaviors, desired behaviors in the previous box, or multiple, if you're targeting multiple present behaviors or multiple desired behaviors, then you're probably not doing it right, because each of those desired, like a person can only do one thing in a particular moment, right? So in the target section, you need to be as specific as possible. But from the align section, you can have a few different favorites. Well, in terms of the specifics, like is the human motivated to do the target behavior? Yes or no? But then what strategies are you taking from there on? You can have multiple inputs for sure. And then try out the ones that look that seem to have the highest impact.
Okay.
And that's why I think, like, to be honest, guys, the canvas, you know, I don't know if you've used the business model canvases, but canvases are they're visual processes, but they never have enough real estate to do as much as you could do with them. And that's why having a digital canvas and kind of posting multiple ideas there and having different versions of a canvas, that would be the ideal way to have a real canvas going. Because you'll test some ideas, or you might even talk to users and then come back and say, oh, these 3 things that we looked at here, not so hot. Maybe we have new ideas now. So in some ways, it's sort of like a living document. And yeah, but in these sorts of exercises, which are really short, we just, we keep it very simple.
Yeah.
But ideally also you wanna keep it simple, because each of your ideas which you have now come up with will have in the shape section, you're going to get really detailed with them. And then whatever you design there, you're going to actually turn them into product, UX, UI designs or audio, what have you, and someone's going to execute them. So it's a lot of work. So it's like, how can we be really sharp and precise at the level of the canvas, so everything that comes out of it is kind of controllable. And one of the main things that happens when you actually work on a canvas as a team is that you find that different team members have different opinions about what to do. And that's another good exercise, so you can kind of all come to the same page. But definitely, yes, to answer your question, multiple inputs are cool as long as there's some sanity to the amount of data in there. Great.
Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, Jamie, I don't know if I got to the motivated part, but really the motivated box, user intent box, is also to document, what you understand about the motivation. Is there motivation? Hopefully, what kind of motivation is it? Is it more intrinsic or extrinsic? Is there anything about the motivational moment, those peaks that we looked at, motivational waves? Is there anything in that connected to that which could help us, etc., etc.? So yeah, it's also a documentation box.
Okay. So I just wrote intrinsic. I didn't know what else to fill in here.
Yeah.
Is there something else that you would imagine being added to this box? In my example.
Wow, that's very interesting. I think there's a case for both extrinsic and intrinsic, but it really depends on which one we want to design for. Because if you're talking about the learner, I don't know, like studying for an exam or something, or studying for some kind of, they're doing it as a sort of, there's an external goal attached to it. They're not doing it purely for intrinsic reasons. Then it could be, that they're driven by extrinsic goals. That's also possible. But it's totally a fine choice that you went with intrinsic, because it, you're talking about yourself, and the case that you're talking about is pretty intrinsic.
Okay.
You're not looking at, you're looking at learning and enjoyment, or spending your time kind of productively without necessarily learning or without necessarily having an extrinsic goal of some kind. Whereas,
Yeah.
for example, if Duolingo was trying to design for this context and said, how can I get someone to learn language while they're doing chores or doing housework, right? Duolingo has a clear like points, and there are certain rewards and there is certain extrinsic outcomes you want out of learning a language. You kind of want to be able to pass on a test, right? And that's why language apps, they tend to be designed for extrinsic goals and extrinsic motivation. They're highly gamified, right? So in the same case, if Duolingo was trying to design it, they'd probably go with extrinsic and say, okay, we want to, I don't know, like Jamie, you listened for 10 minutes without a break. Great, you know? So that's a choice that you're making as a designer. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just saying, so there's different features that could be implemented to reward or recognize behavior.
Exactly,
So
yes.
lean towards intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
And then I guess, Tom, did you finish this part already the last time?
Kind of, but I had that sort of weird case of trying to get me to focus on listening or not get distracted or something like that.
Yes.
So I kind of
True.
massaged it into this, like, what's the actual goal there? Usually I'm listening to nonfiction books.
Could you quickly give us your current and desired behavior as well, and take us into the second part?
Right. So my current behavior is that I often miss longish passages of the book because I'm not paying attention.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
My desired behavior, which I now updated a little bit, is to ensure that I'm getting the insights I want from the book. Which is kind of like runs counter, or that's like a problem. That's why it's a problem if I get distracted, because then I don't.
Right.
I have to like keep re-listening to it, but like the kind of goal behavior in a way is getting those insights.
Right. The goal of that behavior is to get those insights. Yes.
Or that's why I'm listening to the books, basically.
Right. Right on. Yes. Yes.
So yeah, I'm very motivated to learn.
Yes.
That's kind of like an intrinsic thing.
Yes.
Depending a little bit on the subject of the book, could be
Yes.
also kind of extrinsic. Sort of somebody at work told me to read this book, or at school or something.
Yeah.
And then there's these kind of like peaks and valleys, like in the morning. If I'm listening in the morning, I have a lot of time and I'm highly focused. Might be like more motivated to like pay attention.
Yes.
And really like ensure that I'm getting insights. Whereas if I don't have a lot of time and I'm just kind of like, well, yeah, maybe in a situation where I don't have a lot of time and I'm just like running or doing housework, behavior is not gonna be like, I want to learn something. It's more about like, I just want to listen to something. So I don't know if I'd like, maybe it's not even a good idea to listen to an audiobook in that situation. But, yeah.
Mm.
I'm not sure if that's really like a motivation thing though. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, I think like the main thing is that I'm yeah, or go ahead if you had some.
No, go ahead.
So I think mainly I'm motivated. I'm sure there's like ways to amplify the motivation. Like I thought this idea of like adding some motivator, like add a pre-chapter summary or something that kind of like teases you like, hey, this stuff is really interesting.
Yes.
Maybe you want to pay attention. But that might not be necessary if it's already like a book that I'm interested in. But then, yeah, it's like when you're listening to an audiobook, it's hard to kind of make notes while you're going. Or like this happens to me a lot, that I hear like an interesting quote or something that I'd like to, use later and sound smart. But then it's hard to kind of like, if it's like a 10-hour book, then I'd have to like stop it and write it down somewhere. Well, this is already going into like features, I guess, but yeah, somehow making it easier to return to those really insightful moments. That would be kind of like, I don't know, is that a resource or opportunity?
So just to kind of feedback what you said, the current behavior is you're not paying attention for long passages, long stretches of the content in the book, and you are already listening to audio. You are listening to the book already. Okay. Then the desired behavior is that you get the insights. But see, the slight problem with that is that's not a, you shifted a bit from last time's class, I think, and it's an advancement, but getting the idea is not a behavior. It's not something Tom does. Tom can do. It's something that happens to Tom. It's an experience, right? So that's not something that could count as a behavior. So you need to translate that into a behavior and say, sign off. I don't know. I'm sorry for a terrible like thought here, but take a short quiz on the features, on the insights, or mark insights as read.
Yeah, right.
Listen to the insights, and actually right there you solve the problem to such a great extent, because it's very funny, isn't it? Because when you guys, just in general, I keep saying don't define the feature, but as you can see, if you define the behavior properly, you're already starting to define the feature to some extent. And it's unavoidable. So, but we are not yet trying to say it should be a quiz or it should be a list, but like mark the insights as heard, or mark the insights as seen, or you know what I mean. Yeah. So I think that's a really good sort of intervention already, if you can define it clearly as to what the user should do with those insights.
Yeah.
And it's quite a trippy behavior change, because the moment in which you're missing out on the insights, like when you are distracted, I don't know if you can pop up questions about insights 5 minutes later and say, hey, did you get these? So how executing that is quite tricky, but I think it's it does work as a theoretical behavior change, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to try it out and see if it works. But
Yes.
I don't know. It feels like can you like put desired behavior as sorry, somebody's asking me opinion whether this meat is good to cook or not. Just a sec.
No worries. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
No
The meat
problem.
is maybe fine, or I don't know. Maybe I have food poisoning. So, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but
No worries.
yeah. Yeah, so right, like, so can the desired behavior be kind of like a totally new feature, like a
Yeah.
quiz, or is that jumping the gun a little bit?
I don't know. It's a possible to kind of be an expert on on these and kind of say what is or isn't, as long as it's something that people can do. It's a choice.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
design choice. And if you say, hey, as the designer, I want to put my user to a quiz. I want to throw a quiz to my user or a pop question. Answer random pop questions about insights. Desired behavior.
Yeah, I think like the underlying desired behavior is still to just like you need to pay attention to what you're listening to, right? Like, isn't that the
Yes, it is.
and
But
then-
the only problem with that is, yes, that is the desired behavior. But the only problem with that behavior is that you don't know. Just someone paying attention is not evidence that they are paying attention. If someone is shopping or someone's playing a game and they advance to the next level, it's a behavior that where they advance to the next level, but it's also evidence that they advance to the next level, right? If you score a goal, you scored a goal,
Right.
and it's clear to everyone that you scored a goal. But if I'm paying attention, I know it, but there's no way from the outside world to get any evidence that Tom is paying attention. So I have to use a proxy behavior to find out if Tom is actually paying attention.
Right.
And
Yeah. So it has to
so-
be measurable in some way.
Exactly. It has to be evidentiable, I guess, if that's. So then you have to translate that kind of that problem, a tricky behavior, into something which gives you evidence. Yeah, I don't know. Like if you say, "Hey Tom, are you used to zoning out while listening to long passages?" You say yes, and it says, "Okay, we'll pop some pop questions to you every once in a while on insights. Would you like that?" Or even if you just pop up a question while the user is listening to a long stretch and say, "Hi, quick question. What was the summary of the last paragraph?" And then say, "Don't show me questions like this, or answer the question." Probably there are a few different ways that you can get the user to kind of opt into this pop question system.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. But I don't know, you might have a completely different, like a better current desired behavior than the pop questions. I'm sorry to be focusing on that so much. It's just the example I have in mind, but That's why in some ways also the kind of like the canvas tends to change, and in some ways you kind of generate desired behaviors also as a result of doing the canvas. So it's up to you for the moment what you would like to place there, and revisit it after you filled the canvas and see, is this still what I want to go for? Or do I have a more like nuanced idea of what I want to do? Cool. Okay, so what target behavior are you gonna go for, Tom?
I think yeah, well, I need to think about that a little bit then. What's the sort of thing that I can get evidence from?
You're not satisfied with the questions?
Well, I mean, we can go with that, sure. Like a post chapter question thing, or like every 15 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds actually like a pretty good intervention, to be honest.
Okay, well then it's like, am I motivated to do a post chapter quiz?
Yes.
Maybe. That
Okay.
depends on the use context again. So unless it's voice controlled, that could be interesting, I suppose. Well, let's say I'm motivated because I want to get the insights. And how do we amplify that quiz? Yeah, well, one way to do it, I guess, would be to make it voice controlled or something like that. So it's easier to interface with the quiz in different situations, for example. That you don't need to use your hands. So I guess that's like, I don't know, removing a physical effort barrier or something like that.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think you stumbled on something that also makes sense for what Jamie and Iris are talking about. This whole, doing something else, multitasking. I think needing to have physical interactions are definitely a barrier. So you're physically constrained there. Cool, that's a good point. So you would write down something like audio-based questions, or rather removing the need for physical interaction through audio, basically.
Yeah, something like that, for example. Or just like make this, because like audiobooks, they just like keep going. There's no big breaks. So it could take some example from like guided meditation or something like, okay, now take a minute to think about this thing or something like that. So
that's very cool.
You don't really need to do anything. You just like don't need to even hit pause. Like kind of. Yeah, I think a lot of books have those kind of things. And yeah, go for it.
Jane?
No, you finish that thought. I was just asking if there's a lot more content that you want to get to today. The time that we have left.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like 6:20 now. So
well, there's some content. I mean, my worst case was I would talk about diversity, get into diversity and behavioral AI, or like basically data at scale, behavioral data at scale in the next class as one class, because then we could just remain in theory, or we could talk we could kind of get into that and discuss that and not jump between this case and that one. So the last part really is this, basically, it's shaping. And I think it's super interesting. I mean, what we've done with this Audible so far. And the reason I've been very interested in working on an audio-based case is because when it's voice-based interactions, the whole paradigm of how we interact with stuff tends to be different. It's so kind of weird in some ways. No screens, or as few screens as possible. And you're trying to get rid of the screen, right? And with the screen, you're trying to get rid of touch. You're trying to engage through voice and hearing, which is a whole, is a box by itself. But so if you look at this one here, the third part is where, by the time you get to this part, you already have a number of ideas in terms of what that behavior looks like. You also have some idea of like what features support that behavior or drive that behavior already. And so this part just tries to break down that behavior in terms of its main components from theory, which is a habit loop. And you kind of have two kinds of habit loops or behavioral loops. Well, if it's done over and over again, tends to be a habit. But if it's, especially if it's done over and over again without much conscious effort, tends to be a habit. And otherwise, if it's just done once or a few times, it still kind of satisfactorily describes what a behavior looks like. And really, we don't have anything better than this in theory for what a behavior looks like. And you can start to see how the theory and the models and the gaps between that and practice, they remain. We don't have perfect models for anything, but this is the best we have, at least from my knowledge. And the basic idea is that, well, there's some kind of a trigger that drives behavior, which is either internal or external. And the user takes some kind of an action, and then there is some outcome or reward that comes out of doing that behavior. And the action here is the same as the desired behavior usually, but it's just more refined. By this stage, you're very, very specific in terms of what's that micro behavior that the user would do. Say this, touch that, press this, whatever. And the behavioral event would be the data that's captured, which would help form your analytics model. And the cue is, of course, we talked about types of cues in the previous class, different types of triggers. But this is Fogg's breakdown of triggers. You could think of triggers using this model, or you could think of triggers as just internal triggers or external triggers, where the internal trigger is some craving from the inside that from inside your psyche that you want to respond to, or external triggers could be something that's activated from the outside. I also think about active, passive, and blended triggers, where basically active triggers are kind of, they're hot and loud, and they interfere basically, like a notification or a pop-up. Passive is something that just, it's a trigger, but it's kind of like sits in the background. This may be just a, for example, a well-designed car or a well-designed piece of furniture, for example. You may walk into a store or walk into someone's home and notice something because it's not actually obtrusively jumping out at you, but it is nevertheless a trigger. And a blended is something in between. I think blended is like, I'll probably even get rid of that because it's almost like different states of a trigger. Some triggers can be, in some states, they can be more active, and other times they can be more passive. But basically you try to break down your behavior into these three parts, and the reward is, we talked about different kinds of reward types, rewards through time, and rewards of like the self, like in the moment right now. So yeah, this is where you break down your behavior and try to nail it in terms of what it should be. And I think a case like this Audible is like really tricky, because in Tom's case, for example, what should be the cue or the trigger?
Oh, are you asking me?
Oh, I'm just thinking aloud together with the class, I guess. Because if I guess it's a time-based active trigger, isn't it? One of the solutions we had was a time-based active trigger.
Yeah, so the trigger is something that triggers behavior in the user.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess any kind of prompt or question would work like that.
Yes. Prompts, questions, any feature in the environment, or even a feature on the kind of the internal world of the human being, like your desire for coffee, or your desire to go out for a walk, or it's not something that's necessarily from the outside world. But no, in your case, Tom, I was thinking, like, since we're doing the canvas for the Audible case, I was saying that the trigger would be periodical active triggers. So would you say every half an hour? Or could we do some, natural language, run some natural language algorithms with the text and pop those questions after the most complex parts?
Yeah.
I mean, if we had the scale, a company like Audible can certainly find out, like can learn which parts of a book are the most dense parts.
Yeah, I'm sure they have some data from like where do people go back the most or something like that.
For example, yes.
Yeah.
So the trigger would be then pose or pop up questions after the most dense parts. That could be one kind of trigger. The second option could be pop up questions every half an hour or so. Could we work with that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Any other thoughts, guys? Okay, so then if we said that the trigger would be pop-up questions after the most dense part, what could be the action? The user basically takes the question, answers the question.
Right, yeah, then it's hard to if it's just like a prompt to like, hey, think about this for a moment,
Mhm.
then that's difficult to measure again, I suppose.
Exactly. Yes.
So you would need to prompt for some kind of response.
Yes.
But I'm sure Audible would again have some kind of the resources to do, if you would have to like speak it out, for example, they could do the voice to text.
Mhm. Ah, nice. Interesting. So you're saying get the user to record an audio feedback.
Yeah, well,
I
that,
don't,
yeah.
I don't know what the head of engineering would say to that, but you just never know, because the resources of these companies are so large that they could just be like, yeah, sure. But from a behavioral point of view, what does it, I think it actually is quite powerful to have someone record something or say something, because when you speak something, you really, I mean, it kind of, it embeds the thought. You're being active about it. So it's quite powerful, but also answering questions.
Yeah, that's not the reason why I listen to books, is not to answer questions.
Exactly. Yeah, your problem is a very complex one. It's a really, really complex one.
Maybe we can walk through some of the other examples if they'd be easier.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can take something else as well. Katie, how are you feeling about this shape box? I know it's so little time to actually brainstorm and come up with real ideas, but what are your thoughts at this point?
Okay, so for mine, just as a refresher, I was trying to get
Yes.
people to, or get myself to trust Audible's suggestions for me. So from the just purely like, well, how would you get someone to
Mhm.
trust? It seems like from a bigger picture.
No, sorry, no. I don't think you were getting them to trust. I mean, your target behavior was to pick books from the recommendation, the in-app recommendation, instead of from search or like the Amazon website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's let's not forget that. I mean, that's the target behavior. You decided to use trust as a way to make that target behavior happen.
Okay.
Okay, great. Then
It seems like there's like multiple ways to do that. Like
yeah.
for example, I'm thinking like bigger picture, like with outside the app, there could be a lot of marketing around this idea,
Mm-hmm.
like influencers that are promoting this feature or something like that,
Oh, interesting.
or free content that they are somehow
Mm-hmm.
suggesting to you,
Yeah.
or you could like gain another credit if you just try something
Yeah.
that they've suggested.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think like credits are like obviously a big motivator,
Mm-hmm.
and just outside of Audible,
Yes.
they have some kind of like credit system for at least I don't know for you guys, but in the US you get digital rewards if you wait to have your things shipped like a week later.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think they can apply a lot of that to
Mm-hmm.
Audible, but they haven't.
Right. Hmm.
And then like thinking about it from the actual app,
Yeah.
um, I was thinking that they could have maybe some kind of way to entice people to try it. Because just part of building trust is getting people to try it, would you say? So maybe some teaser videos or content inside of the app. Um,
Yes. Yeah, just quick thoughts. I think when you're talking about rewards that are like points or credits and so on. See, when you're waiting an extra week and getting a reward for it, that's a clear trade-off. Like you're giving up some benefit, like the convenience of having it right now or tomorrow, and you're getting compensated for it, right? But in this case, when you want someone to, in your case, when you want the user to try a recommendation from in the app, the recommendation still has to be good because that's your final goal, right? I mean, if I took the recommendation simply because I'm getting a credit or a few credits, and then the recommendation sucked, like it wasn't good enough, then I'd lose faith in the entire system. So that whole building credibility wouldn't work. So I'd be a little concerned with attaching another reward to it, but rather I would try to probably provide, like the stuff you mentioned, influencers or other users, or something like basically messaging which says 90% of users who tried our recommendations found them powerful. I know that's really poor, but that's kind of the area I think we're going for. So convincing that, you know, this is good stuff and you should check it out.
Yeah, my other thought was
Yes.
to, I guess, show the user that they're at least trying to make it better for them. So having the option to vote if the suggestion was a good suggestion or not. So like showing the user that they have the opportunity to help make the suggestion better, maybe.
Yeah, that's also very interesting. Yeah. In that case, the user would have to do some work, which means they'd need to read the book and then actually give feedback.
Right.
And if that comes with a risk, is that if they read the book and it wasn't really that great, of course you're helping the system, you're helping the community by giving feedback. But yeah, you can think of that as what goes around comes around, and say, okay, I can participate in this activity, in this behavior, because I'll also get some benefits of other people doing it, right? That's also interesting. Yeah. Yes, I think all good ideas there. So when it comes to shaping, you'd need to obviously pick one of these, or be specific, and each one of those ideas you have will have a specific shape in terms of what your cue will be, what the action will be, and what the reward will be. Does that make sense? Cool. Well, that's basically it, guys. I mean, in terms of the canvas, at least, there is theory that we can kind of revisit and so on in terms of rewards and cues and stuff. But I think this gives you a general idea about what this tool is to be used for, and how you can basically leverage this tool for behavior design. I think now it's just a question of discussing the tool and potentially other frameworks also on Slack. There are a few other frameworks which are starting to gain some popularity, but I don't think there's anything else that goes into it with this level of detail. Do you guys have any thoughts or comments?
How many other frameworks would you say are actually out there?
Hmm. There's a collection of behavioral frameworks somewhere that I've seen, but they're extremely scholarly. And they look really complex. But I'm sure that, I think there's quite a handful of them, Katie. And there's specific frameworks for, you know, specific like parts of behavior change. There is a book on behavior change models. I think that's the best one. If you want to look at the biggest picture and get completely, like, just look at how many there are, then there is a book on behavior change. I forget what it's called. It's just a grab bag of all the frameworks out there. And it's mostly written from a BE perspective, behavioral economics. So I can find that book and drop it to you in the Slack if you like. But there's easily tens and tens of frameworks. Like, I mean, if there's 100 frameworks out there, I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't know any that are actually done for purposes of design. And I think most of them are done from, yeah, they look at interventions for sure, but they also like tend to be really scholarly, or then very, very shallow. Yeah, I can definitely drop some of those links.
So is there also an Audible link that you can drop?
Audible link to, sorry, I didn't get that.
For the book, yeah, for the book that you're recommending, but behavior models.
Oh, that one. I don't know. I don't know if there's a, no, I want to read. That's interesting too, you know. That's a book I wouldn't want to like even
Listen to.
try to exactly experience on Audible, because it's so visual. It's something you want to look at. That's actually interesting, right? So Audible does not lend itself to all kinds of books, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, it's not really, yeah, it's a very academic feeling, not like nicely designed, you could say, like not very aesthetic visually and stuff, just kind of clunky. And then if you start getting into papers and stuff, oh man, there's lots of people who are putting out a framework for this or that on behavioral science websites, psychology websites, academic journals. There's a lot. But yeah, I think it's a question of, I've reviewed like a lot of them and looked at a lot of them over a decade. And I find that these elements, I'm not saying this is a perfect arrangement of them, but these elements seem to get to the heart of what most of the leading thinkers are saying. And someone like Hooked or is looking purely at the habit hook and looking at what you see on the screen right now with an extra element. Of course, Nir Eyal has a 4-step process. This is a 3-step process just to keep it simpler. Then there are guys like Fogg who are looking, they don't really look so much at this. They look a lot more at this part and tell you that, hey, there is these elements, motivation, ability, and trigger are necessary. And then there's everyone who talks about present and desired behavior. And some place the present and desired behavior on two ends of the canvas. So that was one design challenge I had right from the beginning. was whether I should place the desired behavior at the very end here. And then, okay, you take the present behavior, but then the whole model kind of breaks down, like, what is the motivation behind the present behavior? And how can you transform that into a desired behavior? That's a completely different kind of a approach and problem than saying, what is the behavior change we want to create right here in the beginning? And then look at, is the human motivated to change that behavior? So I don't know if that makes sense, but really, in the end, you're playing with the same elements of behavior change, motivation, and then the actual mechanics of the behavior itself, which is the trigger, the action, potentially the reward.
So in essence, there's it's the core principles of behavior change that are
Mhm.
shared.
Yep. Yeah, and it's pretty, like, if you look at Amy Butcher's, Bucher's book, all of Fogg's work, Amy Bucher's work, who's becoming very recognized in the field now, they generally place this motivational piece at the very center and take it from there. So there seems to be a decent consensus in the industry now as to what this whole profession is about, really. But yeah, the best way is to just keep track of what's going on and update oneself. Should I show you the video on personality before we close for today? Clearly, there's a lot for you guys to think about here, and we can always come back to this on Slack.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, I hope this thing works. Computer seems to have cooled down. Yeah, I think, like I said, again, as the method that I've developed and the method that I kind of have a strong affinity for, and sort of, I find it satisfies the criteria required by behavior change interventions. I would say that I would recommend that you guys try to apply this first in your cases. And of course, you know, if you're trying to do behavior change work, then whoa, it's going to be an iterative process. So I'd say apply this first, see where this thing kind of breaks down or you see gaps. And then if you find other models that fulfill those gaps, then I would love to have a conversation. But of course, I mean, it's also fun if you want to take 2 or 3 different kind of frameworks, apply them on one case and see what happens. That's also that could be a good way to learn it as well. Okay. Before we, just like, we'll go into this a little bit more, hopefully the next time, but really the big 5 personality traits are kind of the dominant model for personality theory that currently exist. There was the what's it called, the 16PF personality type and other types of personality type questionnaires which existed before, but really a lot of those are starting to be kind of completely left behind. And the big five, or the ocean model, as this is called, is the one that's starting to dominate. And the reason we're looking at diversity is this is where things get really complex, right? I mean, if you look at this canvas here, when we looked at all the behavioral targeting and the motivation and stuff, then I put individual differences and diversity at the very bottom here, because it is really, really kind of the big picture. It's like cultural differences and individual differences, and diversity in terms of how individuals vary from each other is the part where things get really, really complex. In fact, there's a really interesting paper I was reading today, or a report about how to scale behavioral experiments. And this is what I want to go into a little bit next week. It just came out, so I've not read it fully myself, but you guys all know that when you start with certain insights, you're always confronted with how does this scale? And turns out that people are quite different as individuals, but we are, as a field, there is some consensus on how to break them down by a set of finite types. And these are all trait theories. They're all based on traits. So this video I found to be quite kind of simple, and it explains the concept of the big five quite well. So let me just see if I'll stop this. Yes, optimize for, oh, sorry. Oh, wow. Oh. Yes. Okay. There you go.
Traits claims that we can describe ourselves with 5 main characteristics. The theory of the Big 5 personality traits claims that we can describe ourselves with 5 main characteristics.
Oh.
Open, conscientious, extrovert, agreeable, neurotic. Each of us varies in how much of each trait is shown in our personality. In order to understand what each trait really means, let's look at these 5 characters and how they cope after they wreck their boat and are stranded on an island in the middle of the ocean. Open Odalia is excited and interested in exploring this beautiful island. The exotic nature inspires her. She has collected stones, shells, and blossoms to decorate the entrance of the bamboo hut that she built for everyone. She feels this is an opportunity to learn so many new things. Claire is conscientious. She is not excited. She is concerned about the seriousness of the situation. She is glad she saved the survival kit from their ship. As usual, she is prepared and starts the crucial tasks right away. She feels that it is her duty to organize everyone and make sure that they will start looking for the things they need for survival: fresh water and food. Extrovert Emil is thrilled because they all survived. He feels a strong need to talk and share his happiness. He gathers everyone to celebrate their survival and to tell them about his plan to explore the island together. Agreeable Albert is kind by nature, and despite being tired and thirsty, his main concern is Nora. He offers her a drink from his coconut. The others know that he usually agrees to everything and are not shy to ask for his help. Nora is neurotic and easily stressed. She has a total breakdown. She sits down on the beach and cries. How are they ever going to get away from this island? To her, The ocean around them looks endless. Nature looks dark and dangerous. She feels completely lost. After 8 weeks, 2 ships appear on the horizon. Everyone gets excited. Emil has the idea to make a fire. He calls the others to help. Claire immediately starts to work. Albert brings more wood. Odelia is holding up her beautifully arranged SOS sign, while Nora screams desperately for help. Little do they know who is sailing on these ships. The first ship carries a group of psychologists who have been traveling the oceans since the 1980s. They are investigating the Big 5 personality traits, which is also known as the 5-factor or ocean model. The captain, Louis Goldberg, coined the term Big 5. He is thrilled when he sees the 5 friends at the beach, each one matching exactly one trait: open, conscientious, extrovert, agreeable, neurotic. Though he decides not to stop the boat. As a scientist, he prefers to watch from afar. On the other ship are 5 pirates, all possessing the exact opposite traits of our friends. Let's see if you can recognize them. Pirate 1 is emotionally stable and very relaxed. When she sees the survivors on the beach, she says, "We could help them." Pirate 2 immediately gets angry with her. He is not listening to anyone and is not willing to change his plans in order to help some strangers on an island. Pirate 3 thinks this is a complex situation. He thinks that all possible outcomes need to be considered. He feels the need to be alone and think. Pirate 4 doesn't care. He's busy looking for the keys to his treasure chest, which is lost again. The captain is not open to any new experiences. He ends all discussions when he says, "Our boat won't stop." What do you think about the Big 5? Do you recognize your own personality in some of the traits? Or do you think this theory is flawed, as we cannot describe an entire personality in 5 parameters? If you watch this in class and you are not sure which traits you have, pick a friend and describe each other. Many of us are bad at describing ourselves, so an outside perspective is often helpful.
Okay. Well, that was kind of well-rounded.
Really cute video. Well done.
It's nice that they provided this balance to the whole thing. And so think about it as, okay, one of the main things which you see in this slide or this kind of screenshot here is that these 4 traits are more or less, they have a positive orientation, and neuroticism is like a negative trait orientation. And ooh, oh, nice, yeah. So that's one thing to remember. The other is also that each of these is like a scale, which I can show you if this thing works. Nice. Yeah, so each of these ocean traits has a high and low dimension, or it's on a scale of high and low, and it has 2 subtraits on the 2 sides of it. Now, different scholars and different professors will describe these subtraits to you slightly differently, but they generally stand for these things where, you know, someone who's open to experience is, or high in openness to experience is imaginative, outgoing, typically interested in things like art, creative, etc. And those who are low on openness to experience are more conventional and potentially conservative, potentially close to new novel experiences, and so on. And so on for all the traits, right? The conscientious people are these much more organized. There's a lot of So over a period of time, once you get the model down, you see that there's lots of research being done in terms of correlation between people who are high in conscientiousness and their long-term success. For example, high conscientiousness is supposed to be a decent predictor for long-term career success or life success. People with high conscientiousness tend to be quite stable and do quite well in life. Extroversion is and on the other hand of conscientiousness, you have the spontaneous people who are low in conscientiousness. They tend to be messy. They tend to be disorganized. They tend to be spontaneous. And then you can have the extroversion trait where people draw their energy either from other people and being outgoing and being immersed in social situations, or they draw their energy. They need to recharge by themselves, and it's not like they don't like people or they don't like to spend time with people. It's that they need to draw away from people in order to recharge. Agreeableness has been there's been a strong correlation between agreeableness and certain professions, for example, and definitely also I think there's been correlations between lack of correlation. Sorry, there's been research about lack of correlation between agreeableness and people in sales or lawyers and so on. Then lawyers and salespeople tend to be low in agreeableness. And I am just quoting studies that I've read somewhere. I do not know how generally applicable these are, because personality is this sort of space where you constantly have, or you have some papers and you have people writing about, is this whole model, does it even work? Does it work across cultures? This is controversial and kind of definitely not fully agreed upon territory. But anyways, people with agreeableness tend to be high on trust, and they tend to be pleasing of other people as well. And all of those four are somehow kind of their positive personality dimensions, in the sense that even if you're low in extroversion, it's not a negative thing. It's just you're low in extroversion, you're low in terms of needing people contact. But then this neuroticism at the bottom is like the higher it is, the more negative that it's more of a significance of a negative trait. And then people who are emotionally stable tend to be low. So basically there are different kinds of questionnaires that you can answer, and you guys took one as well in the beginning of the course, but I don't have time to revisit that. I'll collect those for the next class and just revisit that and see what came out. But yeah, this is like the most standard model that is known in the field towards measuring these individual differences. And basically, if you take a set of questions, the model can give you a reading of where you fall on these different dimensions. Yeah. And then there are certain subtraits, and there is a certain explanation for what that means. So yeah, I just wanted to, even if you do like a quick search on the internet, you'll find a lot of these start to jump out. For example, new studies throw into doubt the universality of the big five. How universal are these? There are, new study throws into doubt. It's very vague. It's not like totally disproven. It's not totally proven. It's sitting somewhere in between. There's definitely a lot of linkage between personality and things like leadership. Is there a certain leadership type personality? There is research on personality and intelligence. People who are open to experience, people who are, I think openness to experience and IQ have a strong correlation in some studies. So Intelligence and achievement striving, but not straightforwardness, may predict the newly elected president's effectiveness. So there's, is personality the key to successful aging? Wow, really? Like, can you have a personality which actually determines how you age? That's really, really interesting. So it's a very, very broad and very like a subject that just has all these relationships. Personality may be the key risk factor in preventative healthcare. What, again, conscientious, that is the C in ocean. Young adults enjoy better health as they age. Yeah, this is it's a massive field. And this is from a book, but really the big 5 personality dimensions. The high scorers tend to be outgoing and enthusiastic, aloof and quiet, prone to stress, emotionally stable, stuff I already talked about. Yeah, and that's the model. And yeah, the trick is how do you learn more about types of users from their behavior or by their explicit feedback in terms of what personality they have. I have been working on one project connected to a chat application where we were trying to assess the personality of the user through a series of questions, so that we could kind of, the chat could adapt to their personality a bit better, and stuff like that. So it's out there as a theory, and it's definitely used a lot where you can directly administer a questionnaire, for example, in hiring, or like lots of other situations where you can directly administer a questionnaire, have you take a few questions, and then, okay, boom, this seems to be your personality, so let's try to drive your behavior or engage with you in this particular way. But when you're designing, say, if you were trying to do that Kindle app, the Audible app, how do we apply this stuff into that product? That remains, I've not seen such things being done anywhere yet, but it is my belief that we could. So yeah, that was the stuff on personality and basically the big 5, guys. There are a few other theories. I mean, the study of personality is really large, and the study of individual difference is also very large, but this is what we could touch today. And I think if you get a good grasp of the big 5 and look at what's happening around this ocean model, you're going to have a really good start in this area. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
I think Jamie and I have thought a lot about personality in our project, and it is like very, very tricky because a lot of our work has been about like maintaining habits like long term, and because everyone is motivated different, or there's different ways to motivate, but then individually people have different personalities.
Yes.
And so it's like there's so many layers to sort through. And then, as you said, like it seems like the future is, are we able to actually identify all these possible personalities, and like will AI be able to just sort through all that and like do that for us? And
exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to, well, one way to figure out is just to try and apply it, but that you're talking about in terms of the data, being able to analyze data and be able to like run data science on that data at scale. These questions are, yeah, we're going to need significant resources to try them. So
yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't know, but do you suppose that like Facebook has already attempted this sort of route?
I honestly don't know. I have been trying to figure that out, and I've gone so far as to try to talk to recruiters inside Facebook, for example, to understand where someone like me would fit in their organization. But even a company like Facebook seems to be extremely, and this is just my opinion, I don't know the objective truth, but there's massive data science teams, of course, in there who are very data science driven, and they have success criteria for what their algorithm should do, and they kind of design algorithms and just go through massive data, train those algorithms on massive data sets, try to get the data sets right, and try to get the success criteria right. And from those guys, it's hard to understand what success criteria mean to them, or what do they define as success. Typically, it could be engagement and usage and growth and these kinds of growth criteria. And then there's like the user research divisions, and there they definitely employ psychologists and social scientists and stuff. But there it's also hard to tell unless you're an insider, really. Basically, unless you're an employee, it's just absolutely impossible to tell anymore what models they're using. I have not seen any such ideas discussed in Facebook's data science blog. They do have a data science blog. Uber writes about data science as well. But at least when it comes to personality, I haven't seen it surface there. I've seen it happen more in like consultancy type settings, exactly like what Fabric does.
But yeah, if the whole like the traits are, or these like generalizable traits are already kind of questionable,
Mhm.
then like they're just like a model to explain or categorize people, or that's how I see it.
Yes,
But
and
AI basically helps us to just look at people on the really atomic level, that like everybody's an individual, and then just target the services based on that person's behavior. Like I'll give a example that I noticed today.
yes.
I don't know, I guess you probably noticed this for yourselves as well, but I tend to like watch a lot of yoga videos only in the mornings.
Mhm.
So I noticed that now YouTube, if I open YouTube in the morning, it gives me only like yoga videos and calisthenics stuff.
Mhm.
But then if I look at it at different times of the day, then it gives me like different things. So I
Mm.
think, they're already doing some kind of like behavioral tracking, but it's not getting like, I think they're just gonna get more and more precise with that stuff, like what kind of
Yeah.
behavior they are.
True, I think you're totally right, like micro-targeting and driving micro behavior, but it depends on where in the product or where in the experience we are talking, but these models could be useful at some other place, you know what I mean? Yeah, so if you look specifically at YouTube and Facebook, let's say, which are again two very different, but they have some similar characteristics. Their end goals are engagement and growth and stuff like that. But why can't I use a personality model to load recommended videos to Tom? So surely they are learning from your morning behavior that you prefer to, or the likelihood of you engaging to yoga videos is quite high. But that's not the only use you have of Facebook. And let's say if you are a very neurotic personality, or you are high on neuroticism, which I don't think you are. You seem quite emotionally stable. So, but if you're prone to stress and worry, then I could probably benefit, the algorithm could probably benefit from learning that you are prone to stress and worry and not show you disturbing content or be very clever with showing you disturbing content, right? So in that way, it could help to use this model on top of what they're already doing. What about if someone's more introverted and YouTube could start serving me more meditative, or I don't know, like videos or talks even that are much more oriented towards someone who wants to introspect, who wants to understand themselves, whereas the ones who are more extroverted, they could get videos that are more like which show connection with people and which are more social. So the thing I'm going for here, Tom, is to build on your point, which is a terrific point, is that your current behavior is a good predictor of what you would do in the future, but going only with your current behavior without figuring out who you are to some extent, or who you could be or something like that, is, it leaves an opportunity on the table, doesn't it? And I don't know if just taking these massive amounts of data and saying, well, the data has the answers, and we'll let algorithms learn about behavior about future behavior based on current behavior. I don't know if that's a great game plan, or if it falls short, if it could be made even better with a model like this.
Yeah, but in order to build the model, or like to assign you to the correct bucket in the model, you still have to get some information from that person, like
Exactly.
these questionnaires or something.
Exactly. And so what if we tagged the kind of, like, that's where I'm thinking the models come in. So what if we saw a pattern to the kinds of videos watched and said, okay, all these videos are probably preferred by conscientious people, or watching this video is a marker of conscientiousness. Yeah, this is the thing in machine learning, which a lot of people are calling for explainable AI, right? And the big kind of question now is in the ethics of AI and in AI in general, is that we don't know on what basis these algorithms are reaching their decisions. So we're going to need to frame somehow a language and teach them to make choices based on this language, so they can kind of explain to us why they're making these decisions, but yeah, I'm obviously I'm being very, very like speculative here. But yeah, that's the space I think where there are opportunities for these kinds of things to be applied in the data-driven world.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. I gotta run now as well. But
Yeah, I think I've got to
have
go
a
as well.
nice day.
Yeah, awesome. Should we take off, guys, everybody?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
I'll record this and we'll continue from here. And tomorrow's the last class, so we can go further into the data science part, look at analytics and stuff like that, and discuss whatever else you guys like.
All
Okay.
right. Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, have a good day, everyone, and good evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.